In this video, I'll give you a few tips to keep in mind while developing your game. The first one is delete unused codes and assets. Maybe when you're creating a game, you're just adding stuff like prototype assets, sounds, graphics, and etc. And you're taking up space, you're adding these things to your project. So your project files are growing, the codes that you're not using are growing. You just forget that you've created a code somewhere that you're not using anymore. Try finding these things, and as soon as you understand that you won't be needing them and you won't be using them, delete them. It will not affect the performance of your game directly, but it will help you in keeping your things organized, and it sometimes gives you this performance in while you're exporting your game. And there are times that Unity keeps a reference to one of your codes or one of the assets in your game that you're not using, and it will actually include this in the final project. So it might happen sometimes. It's not a usual thing, but it happens. It has happened for me. And the Unity will sometimes just include the assets that you don't use in the game inside your final project. So always keep in mind to keep your project organized and structured. The second tip is be careful with particles. It's always a good idea to have some cool particle effects in your game and kind of juice up your game using this particle system. Keep in mind that particle systems add a GPU overhead to your game depending on how you're using it. Imagine that you have an animation of 64 frames in your particle, and this particle is generating 1,000 particles each second, and this is going to be a performance issue if your file is not optimized, or you're using 100 or 1,000 of these particles. So each second you're giving your GPU an overhead of 1 million rendering processes per second. So keep in mind that this process should always be optimized as well. And the last tip is deleting unused game objects from your hierarchy. This is kind of connected to the first thing that I explained. So if you have game objects that you won't be using, but you are attaching something in that game object, it will be added to your final export. So keep in mind that if you have game objects that you won't be using, delete them from your hierarchy. And keep your hierarchy organized, just name them in the way that, for example, if you have 100 game objects in your hierarchy, it's a good idea to keep them organized using parents and children. You can always create parent game objects at 000 and just add the other game objects as child objects, so that you won't be changing the positions or messing up with any of the scripts that change positions. Creating a game object at 000 is like just putting your object anywhere in the world. It will not affect the transform.position scripts. So keep in mind that organizing your hierarchy will help you find the game objects that you're not using, and helps you find your game objects much faster if you have like 100 game objects in your scene.